Welcome to Council of Graduate Schools and National Name Exchange webinar on Money Matters, Financial Basics, Every Prospective Graduate Student Should Know. My name is Matthew Linton. I'm the Senior Manager for Programs and Publications at the Council of Graduate Schools, and I manage the National Name Exchange. Just a few meeting logistics as we get started. A reminder that the meeting is being recorded and the recording will be made available with slides to NNE enrollees. So if you have to leave early or you missed out, you'll be able to return to this webinar later. Please submit questions for the speakers in the Q&A button on your toolbar. We will be answering the questions during a moderated Q&A period following the presentations. Finally, you'll have an opportunity to complete a survey after the webinar to guide future NNE programming. Please do complete that survey. It's very helpful for us to find out what sorts of resources you would like to see provided by the National. This meeting is going to feature an introduction and welcome from Chevelle Newsom, President of the Council of Graduate Schools, followed by two presentations, one from Kevin Collins from TIAA, another from Phil Schuman from the Higher Education Financial Wellness Alliance. That'll be followed by a moderated Q&A with presenters, and then we will have a conclusion with some upcoming events. Before I turn it over, put a few learning goals on everybody's radar as we get started. These are the things that we hope you take away from today's event. One is how financial planning is a core part of the graduate school application process. Another is budgeting for graduate school. A third option is weighing competing offers from graduate school programs. Fourth, making sense of loans and student debt. Fifth is understanding return on investment and career pathways. And then finally, returning to graduate school for mid-career and/or adult learners. So with that, I'd like to turn today's event over to Chevelle Newsom, the President of the Council of Graduate Schools. Chevelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Council of Graduate Schools to today's webinar, Financial Education Basics, Every Prospective Graduate Student Should Know. Affordability is one of the most important questions we hear from students considering graduate education. The decision to pursue an advanced degree is both exciting and significant, but it also comes with some financial responsibilities that require careful thought and planning. That's why sessions like today are so important. Financial planning doesn't just start with when you graduate or when you enter graduate school. It starts now. By understanding how to budget, evaluating funding options, and making informed borrowing decisions, you can set yourself up for success, not only for your program, but long after that. Graduate education is also an investment, and research shows that in many fields, advanced degrees open doors to higher earnings and greater career responsibilities and opportunities. But to make the most of that investment, it's essential that you weigh cost against potential returns and to choose a degree path that aligns with your long-term career goals. In other words, mapping your studies to your professional aspirations is one of the most powerful steps that you can take. Today, our presenters will give you practical strategies and resources to help you navigate these decisions with confidence. You'll walk away with tools to better understand affordability, access, return on investment, and plan a path that makes sense for both your professional and your personal future. I would also encourage you to visit the redesigned GradSense website if you have not done so already. GradSense is a financial education website for both current and prospective graduate students that was developed by the Council of Graduate Schools with the support from TIAA. The site includes valuable information about financial planning for grad school, budgeting while you're in grad school, and how to align your graduate education with your financial goals. It's also a tool to help you calculate the return on investment for your degree and budgeting templates. Thank you for joining us today and for taking the first important step toward informed decision-making. We're glad you're here, and we encourage you to ask questions, engage in the conversation, and make the most of this session. I would like to thank our presenters, Kevin Collins from TIA and Philip Schuman, from the Higher Education Financial Wellness Alliance for sharing their insights with us today. What a delight it will be to hear from our speakers, and I'll turn it over to them now.
Thank you so much. I am going to go ahead and share our slides for today. My name is Kevin. I am from TIAA, and we're going to be talking about some basics. I know that we all sometimes get wrapped up in our day-to-day trying to make sure that we are paying our bills on time, but you all are planning to go to graduate school, which is so darn exciting. And so one of the things that I want to make sure that we get through to all of you today is all the preparation that should go into preparing for graduate school before you pull the trigger and before you decide to start your coursework. So as we are going through today's slides, we're first going to talk about defining credit and debt. Many of us are going to take on student loans or take on forms of debt in order to pay for our graduate school in combination with other income streams. And that's why we're going to talk about credit scores for just a portion of today's session. We are then going to talk about using debt wisely, not taking out too much debt, not taking out too little debt. We want to make sure that you are all living fulfilled lives as you are studying. And then we're going to wrap up with some tools and some action steps before I hand it over to my partner in crime, Phil, who will go over his content. So when we're thinking about credit and debt, credit is going to be what someone is willing to lend you. So if you are going to a graduate program or if you need a certain amount, that's what they're willing to give you. Debt is what you're going to take on. So they might say, we're willing to lend you $100,000, but after doing your budget and your calculations, maybe you don't need quite that much and you only take out $30,000. That would be your debt. Now, with some of the different types of loans, specifically Grad Plus loans, those look at your credit score, which is why I'm diving into credit scores in particular. With a credit score, it will help you achieve your goals, get those graduate programs paid for, but we need to make sure that your credit score is in a good place because it's going to affect your eligibility as well as the interest rates that you will be charged. In addition to all of the loans that you might be taking out for your education, this is also applicable to other types of loans that you might have in your life, like mortgage payments, car notes, credit cards, all that good stuff. And just little improvements in your credit score can make a big difference. And so when you are shopping for a loan, specifically for your student loans in this case, you're going to have borrowers putting in those applications for the lenders to look at how good you are about making payments. What are your income streams? What is that history of payments? And so when we look at what a credit score is built out of, the largest portion of your credit score is going to be your payment history. Are you making payments on time? Are you making more than the minimum payment? Have you missed any payments? And so if you're not sure where do you stand with your credit score, we do have those major credit rating agencies such as Experian, and you can go in there and you can run your credit. Now, don't run your credit all the time because that is going to cause a hard check, which could actually ding your credit. Now, the other portions of your credit score include the amounts owed, how long you have credit history, any new credit that you might have. And so for individuals that are just starting out, maybe you are a student and you're going straight into grad school, you might not have a lot of credit history. You might not have a lot that you owe right now. And so it's important to know where you stand. That way, when you are shopping around, you can see the sliding scale from 300 to 850. You can see what those breakpoints might be and what you might be considered as good versus maybe an average or a poor creditor. So when we're thinking about good habits and getting ready to take out those student loans or taking out any loans, definitely make sure that you're paying everything on time. If you do have credit cards, try and play those down as much as possible, especially if we have a credit limit, let's say $10,000. We don't want to be carrying a balance more than $3,000 on that $10,000 limit. We want to really whittle that down, and that's going to boost your credit score and help you with some of that borrowing. Now, if you are thinking, well, maybe I'll close out all my credit cards, don't do that because that reduces the amount of credit that you have available. And on that previous slide, we said credit utilization is the second largest factor. We don't want to whittle down your credit that is available. Now, things that we don't want to do, obviously, we don't want to miss payments. We don't want to make late payments. We don't want to be checking our credit all the time, opening new credit cards, or buying new cars. So we definitely want to stick that, and we want to have that period for maybe 3 to 6 months to allow that credit score to improve and help your borrowing prognoses. So annualcreditreport.com, this is where you can check your credit, see where you stand. Now, we want you to use debt wisely. You might be thinking, Kevin, how the heck do I know how to use debt wisely? How much should I take out? Well, I'm not going to stomp all over Phil's presentation because he's going to give you more information, but I do want to share with you that Credit Sense website, which is fantastic. And so here we have yourgradsense.org. This is the website that was hinted at the beginning, gradsense.org. I want you to bookmark this website, and specifically, I want you to look at this Managing Your Money. This is an online tool. It's free. You don't have to log into anything, and you can do a budget. And so you can put in all the different ways that you are going to be pulling in money, whether it is a fellowship, maybe you have a scholarship, maybe you have anything else. But then you can look at your expenses, see where those map out, and you can see how much you might need to take out when it comes to your loans. You can run multiple scenarios. You could download the calculator. There's even more budgeting resources at the bottom of the page. So if you're not quite sure where to start or how much you should take out, here is an online resource from the folks that put this together, gradsense.org, and we'd love for you to check this out and really start to dive into your situation. Now, if we continue along with our presentation, what I want you to do after today is to take control. Only take on the amount of debt that is necessary to make ends meet. If you cannot afford it, don't take it out. And that's why it's important to do your homework. Understand what programs are out there, understand what institutions you might want to attend, and run those multiple scenarios. We don't want anyone getting underwater or putting themselves, their future selves, behind the 8 ball by taking on too much debt. Also, make sure that you understand the terms of repayment. If you are doing private loans, understand the interest rate environment. Is it a fixed rate loan? Is it a variable rate loan? How long is the payment history? If there are any repayment penalties. Also, if you're doing any sort of consolidation with your loans, make sure that you're weighing the pros and the cons for any consolidation. And this goes for your future self too. If you do have federal loans and you're consolidating into private loans, you might not be eligible for that federal student loan forgiveness program later on when you are trying to pay back or get those loans forgiven. Last but not least, we got to make sure that you have an emergency fund. Your student loans, probably not the best place to get an emergency fund. This is a cash account, maybe your checking account, a savings account, whatever you can draw upon for unexpected expenses. As you are studying and even past your studies, once you get your graduate degree, this is the bedrock for any financial foundation. If you do not have an emergency fund, you're going to whip out that credit card to pay for that unexpected expense. And we all know that credit cards charge a ton in interest. So make sure that you do have a cushion now while you're studying and after you graduate. Your future self and your current self will thank you. If you do want to watch more webinars when it comes to budgeting, when it comes to investing, when it comes to any financial topic, TIAA, my company, we do have lots of webinars available. We also have a fantastic article-based website. That's the TIAA.org/learn website. But do check out gradsense.org. I showed you that budgeting tool. We'll probably show you some more tools as we're going through today's session. But I don't want to waste any more time. I want to get this over to Phil, my colleague, my partner in arms here, and he's going to present his information now. Phil?
Awesome. I really appreciate it, Kevin. I think your excitement is trying to build it up as though like I'm going to be amazing when it comes to doing this. And everybody, I want to temper expectations. We're going to find out. Everybody, I want to temper expectations and just let you know I'm going to do my best. It's what my parents told me to do, and we're going to see what happens with that. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk to you all. My name's Phil Schuman. I'm the Executive Director of the Higher Education Financial Wellness Alliance, which is an organization actually based out of Indiana University, where what we're trying to do is help other universities across the country launch programs that educate students on personal finance. I also started the Indiana University program, so for years I've been doing the financial education piece as well. My task is sort of to talk to you a little bit about the paying for college aspect or paying for grad school aspect of things, and also talk a little bit about the ROI. I'm going to do this in very broad terms, and then once I'm done, I think we can start to get into some questions and really be able to answer questions you might have. And I really think that's going to be the beneficial learning of this session. But bear with me as we go through this, just because I think it's an interesting thing to think about, or a thought exercise with some of the stuff that I want to talk about as it relates to paying for grad school. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to blow up my screen and make sure this works. Kevin, you're going to tell me whether or not I'm in presenter mode or if we're good. This is on you. Are we good? Okay, I get the thumbs up here. That's what I like to see. So talking a little bit about paying for grad school here. The easiest thing I'm going to tell you to do, hopefully you've been doing that through your undergrad, as it relates to any sort of student loans or finding out whether or not you're eligible for them, please complete the FAFSA. Even if you don't think you are eligible or you don't think you're going to get any loans from it or any sort of funding, it is the first thing you should do. It is always the thing you should do. You never know what money might come out of it. You don't have to accept any of the loans that might get offered to you as a result of FAFSA, but you might get opportunities for scholarship or some work opportunities that could help you fund your experience. So please, the first thing you do when you're thinking about going to grad school is complete the FAFSA. Also, make sure you go to fafsa.org and complete it. The first word in that acronym is free, which means that if you go through the process and it says, okay, now you need to pay us for helping you fill it out or whatever, it means you've gone to the wrong spot. Okay? So go to FAFSA, make sure it's free. There you go. As it relates to some opportunities that we get a lot of questions about in terms of paying for grad school, the one opportunity or the one thing I'm not listing here are scholarships. Scholarships tend to be a little bit less common on the grad side of things, or at least they're packaged under a different name. That's not to say that scholarships don't exist, but again, they're more reserved on the undergrad side. You can search for them, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them because I don't think they're as relevant here. The two most common terms that you'll probably come across as it is trying to pay for grad school, not out of pocket and not via loans, are going to come in the form of assistantships or fellowships. Realistically speaking, I'm guessing most people, especially in the master side of things, are going to be more familiar with the assistantships opportunities. That's where basically you are getting paid to go to grad school in return for work. This could come in the form of overseeing a residence hall, or I've got a couple grad students who work in our program helping us oversee our peer financial educator program. That could be for that. It could also be for helping be a what would be called a graduate assistant in a classroom that does some of the work in helping tutor students, maybe even teaching some of the classes. There are a lot of different opportunities. What I would tell you is if you are applying to a program, reach out to that program and see what opportunities are available, but then also see if there are any additional resources throughout your school that might provide additional opportunities. We are not affiliated, like our peer financial education program, we're not affiliated with any school. Students have to find us by having conversations and going through different channels to see that we actually exist. So it's not a part of any major program. You might find those opportunities. Oftentimes, you will get some sort of tuition remission, which could mean just a little bit of a discount. It could also mean your entire tuition is paid for. And then there's usually some sort of grad student stipend on top for those living expenses. On the fellowship side of things, it's very similar in terms of you will probably get tuition coverage and stipend, but these tend to be more competitive. These are more so universities wanting to bring you in for your knowledge in a certain subject, based on your academic merit, your research potential, or diversity goals. You're going to help provide notoriety to the university through the work that you're doing. These are usually about 1 to 2 years in length. The assistantships could range anywhere between 1 year to 5 to 7 years, quite honestly, depending on whether or not it gets renewed. But those fellowships are going to be more competitive, but they're going to be more academic based. And so if you think that's the route you're going to go, or if you think you have that potential, you should start reaching out to universities and see what fellowship opportunities, and also have conversations about what it is you can bring to the university as a result of your academic credentials. Those are sort of the difference between the two, regardless of which path you choose for, or whether or not you're trying to go for both. Just start reaching out to the universities that you're applying to, the schools that you're applying to, and ask them what opportunities might exist. The next thing to think about is post-graduation, both from the undergraduate side, but also the grad student side. And we talk a lot about affordability. It's been mentioned a few times here before, and I want everybody to understand that when we talk about affordability, affordability is a very relative term. What is affordable to me might not be affordable to you. And certainly in the higher ed space as well, affordability is really hard because you might not know that higher ed was affordable until after you graduated, which is a really weird concept. There's affordability in the door, can you pay for school? But there's affordability after, which is can you pay off any debt you might have had to incur as a result of going to school? And so this is to say, is we're talking about the return on investment. It is an individual concept as it relates to higher ed. What we know is that as a result of you going to higher ed, you are increasing the chances of you being able to make more money in your lifetime. There's a lot of research behind that. It doesn't guarantee it, but it does afford the opportunity. But what you have to figure out as part of your calculation going into grad school is you're going to have to figure out, can you make enough money to move your financial life forward? And part of that, you're going to have to determine what are your individual needs. The next thing I will tell you, and this is true, and I'm going to show you on the next slide, it's my favorite slide that I've built, is that your progression probably post-graduation, unless you are you're going to get, to be a medical doctor, or if you're going to be a lawyer, those tend to be very linear progressions as it relates to what you do after you graduate. But most other careers, they're probably going to be pretty non-linear. And again, that's on the undergrad side, that's on the graduate side of things. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to have a lot of things, work-related, person-related, that's going to create these deviations that you're not going to expect. And again, I'm going to show you that. That's okay. But what the financial preparation that you're going to do, and this goes to what Kevin was talking about in terms of debt preparation, credit preparation, just the simple concept of budgeting and family planning and all of these things that you're going to have to start considering as you go into grad school and then afterwards. Being better prepared and having that knowledge set up, and by you all being here, you're really putting yourself in a position where you're starting to prepare. It's going to help you with those non-linear progressions. So all of that said, I am a firm believer in transparency as it relates to finances because I think it's the only way that people can understand how people get to where they are. I will also caveat what I'm about to show you too. This is fun that I'm just teasing this out nonstop. That if you can see it through the camera, my facial hair right now is as long as it's ever been, in part because I'm starting to go white along the chin there. I'm 20 years removed from college, which is a weird thing. And so with that said, oh, we went the wrong way. I wanted to show you the non-linearness of my post-graduation life. And this is full transparency. You can see like salary increases. The red things are things that were not great. Green things that are great. The blue is just what happened. This has been the last 20 years of my life in a financial chart where things have happened, where they've been expected, things that have happened unexpected. There have been student loans involved. But what I would tell you going back to that ROI piece, so I graduated from DePaul University in 2006 with a degree in psychology. I was like, I'm going to make a ton of money because I went to a private four-year liberal arts college. I'm going to move to Chicago, make a ton of money. When I did that, I made $28,400. You asked me whether or not the ROI was good at college right after I graduated, I would tell you no, it was not. And then you hit the recession. The recession hit a few years after, and at that point, I became a social worker in South Bend, Indiana, making $24,000 a year. Same thing. You asked me about the ROI. I'm going to tell you the college wasn't worth it. And at that point, I decided to go back to school, get my MBA. At the same time, my spouse, I recently got married, she went to go get her law school. So between the two of us, we did the really smart thing and took out $110,000 at the exact same time, right? And it was a decision we made. I'm not sure it was the best decision we made in terms of what happened at that point. I'm going to fast forward quite a bit here and just say, like, we both graduated, our career started to take off. But we've had moves. We've had house sales. One house sale where it didn't work out very well for us. We had to move down to Indianapolis as a result of job relocation. We ended up having a child in 2014, which was wasn't unexpected, but it was certainly a thing that, really hampered our ability to move our financial life forward. I mean that very lovingly. I love my daughter, but she's also a financial drain, right? Those two things can be true. But as a result, what's ended up happening is it's taken me probably 10 to 15 years after I graduated before I could say that my higher ed degree has paid off. was absolutely worth it the entire time. It was just hard to see it until I got to that point. The one thing I will say that happened to me a couple of years ago was that I ended up separating from my spouse, ended up getting a divorce, which I can tell you is a huge financial hit to anybody where that happens. And it's a thing that you can't expect. And again, that financial preparation has to come into play. Otherwise, when that happens, it can just derail you completely. This is not to say that it was a bad thing or a good thing or anything along those lines. It's just this is what happens in life. And the necessity of financial preparation will get you to the point where you can navigate those ebbs and flows. This is all things that you have to navigate as a result of post-graduation life, which is kind of crazy, but it's the reason why Kevin and I are here, is to answer some of these questions that you might have. So all of that said, how to navigate returning to school and putting yourself in a position where things are going to work out for you. Number one, if you have the opportunity to leverage any sort of financial employer support or leverage financial support from an employer, do that. It was one of the things that I noticed when I went back and got my MBA was that I was having to pay my own way, but a lot of people who were in that room were having their employers fund it for them. Now, in exchange, they were asking them potentially, you need to work here, you're going to have to commit here or commit to working here for the next 3 to 5 years as a result of this. But they seemed to be fine with that because they were having their education paid for. So look into those opportunities if you're currently working for an employer, or if you're thinking, I might take a couple of years before I go back to grad school, see if you have an employer that might be willing to do that for you and take advantage of that. In addition, any sort of financial gaps you have, between the amount of money you have in your accounts right now and the amount of money you're going to have to pay for school, how are those gaps going to be funded? Are student loans going to have to be a part of the process? How are you going to account for living expenses? Are you going to try to find a job on campus that might give you housing expenses? Are you going to have to take out loans in order to pay for it? If you have a family, whether or not that's like parents or if you have a spouse and kids, have you discussed the financial aspect with them about how you're going to pay for that? Because I think the important thing, and it goes down to this last thing, this last note in terms of prioritizing family, it involves everybody that you live with and could involve some of your friends as well. The most important thing to do, and this is true of, both going back to school, but any other financial decision that's happening in your life, is setting the conversation about what the expectations are going to be, both in terms of finances and in terms of time, because you want everybody to be on the same page. The worst thing you can do as it relates to planning for your financial life is to say, we'll figure it out. That is a recipe for disaster and puts you in a position where you could put a lot of things at risk. So what we encourage you to do is to have those conversations. I know Kevin and TIAA exist to help people prepare for those conversations. We do that as well. So please feel free to reach out to me. I assume feel free to reach out to Kevin as you navigate that. And there's my contact information. We'll get that to you all after we're done today. But with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt. Am I turning it back over to you, or we just turn it over to questions? What's happening here?
I'm back. So I will say thanks so much, Kevin and Phil. I wish that I had had this team of advisors when I was making my financial plan for graduate school. I think things would have been a little easier. But we've got a bunch of great questions. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions ahead of time. It gave us an opportunity to compile some of those so that we could really focus on some key themes here. So the first question that I've got that was submitted ahead was for Kevin. What are some of the different income streams available to graduate students? And how might students maximize their income or various income streams while enrolled in graduate school?
Sure. And I am stealing again from Matt, you. So I know that Phil just went over this. He just went over things that are going to be out of pocket versus things that are not coming out of pocket. And so if you do, again, go to the GradSets website. This has it all laid out. What you can anticipate as funding sources, income sources to pay. So here we have the top 3 main sources. Phil talked about these: fellowships, grants, doing the assistantships. These are ways that you can pay for grad school without having to take out a loan. Now then, we have our personal resources, which are loan, savings, and income. If you want to dive in deeper, this website goes through all of these, and I love these side categories so you can just see where you might want to be. But I think one of the biggest things that I took away from what Phil was discussing was reaching out, being proactive. If there is a program, a school that you want to attend, be proactive. No one is going to give you something unless you ask for it. And so write those emails, get in touch with those universities, those programs, and ask the questions. What is available? I took that down from Phil. I'm like, that is a great piece of advice. But again, gradsense.org, bookmark that website. I'm going to be using it all the time during our Q&A today, but I'll turn it back over to you, Matt, for our next question.
Thanks. Phil, your presentation gave a really nice overview of kind of the particular importance of consulting and talking with family in your decision-making process for graduate school. For folks that might be returning to graduate school after some time in the workforce and that have a family, whether they're parents or children, are there any strategies that you would recommend aside from having the conversations in terms of either budgeting or planning to support a family while you're in graduate school?
I mean, I think, again, the conversation is going to be the most important piece in trying to figure out what you can afford. Now, it could be one of those things as well where you need to have an honest conversation. Again, I'm all about conversations in this and transparency and expectations, because I think if you don't have that, then you're going to put yourself in a position where things could just fall apart and there could be a lot of chaos and just, interpersonal relationships can suffer as a result of not having those conversations. If going to grad school provides a pathway to a better financial life for you and your family, you need to figure out what the time commitment there can be. And if you don't have the ability to pay for, we'll say 9 credit hours worth of grad school, could you do 3? Could you continue to work, or could you find a job where you could work full-time, even part-time, be able to make some income that can help subsidize the cost of you going back to school? It might delay the amount of time, or it might delay how long it's going to take before you get that degree and really move your financial life forward. But that's the thing you got to figure out, is what that trade-off is between the time and the money. What is going to be most important, and what's going to keep you and your family the most stable during that period of time. And that's I think that's where you have to start from. And that obviously goes into budgeting as well, is just what can you afford? Also a conversation about what are you willing to take out as it relates to loans. And I think what's really important to stress to everybody is there's no right or wrong answer to any of these questions. Right? I'm not up here to tell you need to do it this way or you need to do it this way, because your individual situation is going to be different than everybody else's situation. You need to do what is best for you and those that, your decision is going to affect.
Great. So we just got a couple more questions, then we'll get in. I'm seeing we're getting quite a few audience questions as well, which is great. So folks should keep submitting those questions. We'll definitely get to them. So for Kevin, just in a ballpark, kind of, how much in savings should a prospective student have or be preparing to have before applying to graduate school? And then what are some ways of estimating, maybe using GradSense or other tools, of about how much in savings would be appropriate when accounting for the length as well as the cost of a potential program study? But having some trouble with the sound.
Sorry about that. I am going to back up what Phil was saying and say this is all individual. And so as much as we'd like to say, you need to have $30,000 saved up, $50,000 saved up, what I'd rather focus on is, one, first and foremost, we need to have an emergency fund, and that will not be used for grad school, and that will not be used to buy books or attend grad school. That will be used for unexpected expenses. That is what I am most concerned about day one, is making sure that each and every one of you has 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a safe account. And I mean safe account, meaning it's not invested in the market. You're not watching the news and watching the S&P 500. You're not on your Acorn account trading. I want this in an account where you're not exposed to markets. And this is going to be used again for emergencies. Now, beyond emergencies, this is when I want you all to start thinking about, again, your situation. Let's start off first with, what is your cash flow? Positive or negative? We hope it's all positive. If we're in a situation where the cash flow is negative, we might want to just shelve the grad school conversation just for a bit until we get back to the break even. We want our cash flow to be positive because we're adding an expense, the attendance at school. Now, there are a number of different calculators out there that will estimate the cost of attendance. I'm going to go back to the grad school of the gradsense.org website. I'm going to cost and value. I'm going to the by degree calculator right here. By degree calculator on the cost and value tab. This is a great online tool for you to show how much it might cost in your specific field and what you might anticipate to earn later. That's that ROI that Phil was mentioning. Now, this is a long-term decision, right? We're going to attend grad school for a period of time. And so we want to make sure that this is a long-term budgeting item that we can live with for a while. And so what I would suggest is, again, taking your time, putting some time to prepare. As Phil mentioned earlier, we're not going to rush into this. We're not going to do this in a vacuum, and we're not going to say, oh, I'll figure it out. It'll all work in the end, because it might not. And so start off first with 1, what's our budget? Where's our cash flow? 2, is my emergency fund hunky-dory, good to go? And 3, if we do have savings in an account, we again are going to be utilizing those savings in a short time frame. We do not want it locked up in an investment account that experiences losses. And we also want to be aware if there's going to be any taxes due. So if, again, it's in an investment account, like a brokerage account, you might have double taxation. So that's why I would move those savings to an account that is not going to be subject to those types of things, not an investment account. Think certificate of deposit, savings account, checking account, high yield savings, whatever you might have. All right, I'm not going to go any deeper because we have a number of questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Matt. But there are, again, resources for all of you to talk to. Phil, TIAA, we can get you in front of somebody.
I think we do have so many audience questions. I think it makes sense to start getting in there. And actually, the first one that I see is a good fit, I think, for Phil. So Joanna is asking, kind of, what are the best way to pay for graduate classes while still finishing your undergraduate degree? Are there any special programs or advice along these lines? A lot of our NNE enrollees are current undergraduates who are thinking about making the jump straight into a graduate program.
So for that, what you would need to do is look at your school. There are some programs called accelerated master's programs where that may be a thing that you are able to do. That would probably be the most common way that you'd be able to take some master's classes or some some graduate level classes while you're an undergrad student. The hard part for me is to say, like, oh, with certainty, you know, any program that does this or XYZ, like every program is individual. And so for me to say, like, oh yeah, you could always do this is hard to do. But we have seen a lot of universities, because there are a lot of students interested in getting their master's or, you know, doing graduate level classes while they're an undergrad. You can have conversations with them to see if that's possible. That's a pretty smart way of going about it if you are able to do it. Otherwise, you would have to have just conversations with your school to see if there are any other opportunities, but that seems to be the most common way to go for it.
Thanks. Yeah, and sometimes you might see those programs called 4+1 or 3+2 programs at your institution as well. So definitely look out for those.
The other thing I just realized something else. The other thing that I would say is if you can't pay for it in of itself, one opportunity you could do if you happen to be a fortunate student and have some savings off to the side that you're trying to use up and build up for graduate school, you could try and open up what's called a 529 college savings account and start putting money in there where that money would either get invested or you could use it as a CD account, a certificate of deposit account, where it could accrue some interest. In addition, so one of the really nice things about being in the state of Indiana, and it's only for Indiana taxpaying residents, is that we get a 20% tax credit for any contribution we put into a 529 account every year. So if I put, I'll use my daughter as an example, like if I put $1,000 into my daughter's 529 account over the course of a year, when I file my taxes next year, I get $200 back from that $1,000 contribution. So I get $1,200 for the price of $1,000. And actually our tax credit goes all the way up to $7,500 worth of contribution. So I could, in theory, get $9,000 for the price of $7,500. It's not to say that you might be able to do that, but that is a way that if the state in which you are living and are a tax-paying resident has some sort of tax benefit associated with it, potentially putting a little bit of money into a 529 account could provide an opportunity to grow some of that money while you're still an undergrad.
We've got a question from Neil, who asks, would it be better for a return on investment in the long term to take out loans for graduate school that you won't be able to immediately pay off, or take some money out of your personal investment account like an individual brokerage account? Do you have any thoughts there?
Bill or me?
Kevin, you.
Thank you. Okay. So what I might suggest is it kind of depends on your time horizon. If your time horizon is within 5 years, you want to start taking the money out of your account in 5 years. That is a short time horizon. And in that case, if your money is currently invested in something like stocks or a riskier asset class, I would suggest moving it to a more conservative asset class, such as money market, cash, long-term US Treasuries. That said, if you do have a brokerage account, you will be paying taxes on any investment returns that you've had. So if you, in that brokerage account, bought stocks a year ago, you're going to pay long-term capital gains on those investment returns. That is an additional tax that you have to pay. Now, with loans, of course, you have interest that you have to pay. And so what I, again, as we've all been saying, it's an individual discussion. What I might say is bring in statements of both and chat about it with a professional. I have this investment account here. I could anticipate having X taxes. You can also talk to a CPA about this. Or I can take out loans and I've done the research and I've applied for them and the interest rate would be Y. And you can kind of see the pros and the cons for both. Again, with an individual brokerage account or an investment account, we want to keep in mind the liquidity. Are you able to get out of those investments quickly? 2, the market risk. Is it exposed to the ups and downs in the market and do you have a short time horizon? And then 3, the tax penalties or the tax consequences of liquidating those investments. And so long-winded answer, individual discussion, but it really depends, again, on those kind of key factors on what you would like to do when it comes to funding your graduate school.
Okay. Another question related to somebody going from undergrad to grad, pretty much immediately. Phil, it may be a better fit for you, but Kevin, definitely feel free to chime in as well. Someone asks, do you know how undergraduate student loan repayments typically work if you go straight into graduate school from undergrad?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. So if you're going directly from undergraduate to graduate, and this is true whether or not you have subsidized or unsubsidized loans, but I'm going to also assume that these are federal loans that we're talking about. If you, when you go into grad school, you are not required to pay back on those loans so long as you're enrolled, I believe, at least half time. And so if that's the case, you don't have to make payments on that. However, those loans, while you are enrolled in grad school, again, whether or not they're subsidized or unsubsidized, they will accrue interest during that time. So the balance of your loans while you are still while you start graduate school, it will be larger when you graduate because that interest will be accruing. If you have the ability to maybe just make the interest payments on those, like, it's probably going to be a small amount that you could do. That's a way of minimizing, the amount of growth that happens there on those loans. It'll put yourself in a better position after you graduate, but you won't be required to make payments on those. But you do put yourself in a position where those loans will be, a larger once you have to start paying them off after you finish up grad school.
Yeah, this is a question I'm sure that's on a lot of people's minds right now. Caitlin asks, it feels like a more volatile time in our current history, and it's very challenging to figure out and decide on what might provide a safe future in terms of graduate school and career pathways. How do you recommend planning when planning feels really challenging? What are some strategies for planning during uncertain times? I don't know, Kevin, Phil, either of you want to take a shot at it?
We can We can go back and forth on this one because I think it's a really interesting question. Um, the hard thing is, and this is not to make light of anything that's happening right now. It's, I put down in my chart, like I graduated in 2006 and 3 years later the recession hit, the economy tumbled at that point, and there was a lot of uncertainty there. We had a lot of uncertainty in 2020 as well. Like there seems to be pockets of uncertainty every few years, right? And that's not to say that this is not challenging for people going through it right now. It is to say that planning is necessary no matter what time period you're in. And what you have to decide, especially given all the things that are happening right now, is what makes the most sense for you. And also, Kevin talked about like time horizon. The other component of investing that we need to talk about quite a bit is your risk tolerance that goes along with it. And I think this is a risk tolerance question. And if you're a person that's a little bit more averse to taking risk, if you consider going back to school to be the risky thing to do, then maybe taking the career path, building up that financial foundation that could get you to the point when you wanted to go back to school, there'd be less risk involved with it. That could be a potential option. Or you could go back to, or you could start working and put yourself in a position where maybe you find an employer that's willing to pay for you. And that's a way that you minimize the risk as well. Like that's how I think how you have to look at that. The other thing too that I would note, and this is just a philosophical thing more than anything else, do not take this as any sort of advice. The younger you are, the more time you have to rebound from risk, right? And so the longer, right now, as a 41-year-old father of an 11-year-old daughter, my ability to take risk is a lot harder than what it was when I was 25 years old, had no house, had no kids, because now I have obligations that I have to meet. If you're thinking right now might be the time that you could afford to take risk, it's going to be easier probably now than it would be later on in the future. But again, it just sort of boils down to individual preferences and what your risk tolerance is. Kevin, how wordy was that?
It was fantastic. I love that you said philosophical and your name is Phil. I just thought that was very
I didn't
funny.
want to say pun intended because
I knew it was. But I love that Matt asked the jaded millennials about risk and how many times we've been beaten up since we all graduated school. I'll answer the question when it comes to more of like a policy standpoint. And with the evolving policy coming out of our federal government, what I would say is to hedge again for the largest risk. What would happen if the federal student loan forgiveness program is completely wiped out? It is not right now. It still exists in its way. But if we are planning for the riskiest or ultimately the hardest situation to come to fruition, that might be a way for you to set kind of your mind frame, set those guardrails up there, and then plan for that. I'm going to plan on no one helping me repay these loans. I'm going to plan that it will be on me to do so. What would it look like? And that might be a better way to approach it rather than saying, oh, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't know what the policy is going to change. Let's just assume that it does. Now, if you aren't that risky and you're thinking in a different mind frame, of course, then you can plan on PSLF and all that good stuff. But that's how I might approach it if I was hesitant and I wasn't fully confident in how things will go going forward.
We've got a couple more questions we'll do. Austin, looks like he's applying for PhD programs, was saying specifically for doctoral students, I know they usually get a stipend for school and tuition remission. Do you have any advice for ways to manage finances in that situation where you are receiving some support from your institution? Either Phil, Kevin, either of you want to tackle that one?
I'll jump in. So if you are receiving a stipend, money from your institution to attend, treat it as another income source. So again, I showed you the gradsense.org calculator. In that calculator, you can put in any income that you are receiving from a stipend or tuition or reimbursement, whatever. And that way you can kind of plan it out. Now, I would, again, plan it. It's all about a budget. And there are so many budgeting tools. We have the gradsense.org. Every freaking bank has an app. You can download apps, But what we want to make sure is that we're planning. We're not just doing mind math. We're not just saying, I think I can make this work. Put numbers to paper or keys to screen and actually plan on how that income could be used and what it's actually going to look like. And I think that'll put you in a better position to then make smart financial decisions. And that goes for anybody that maybe you're not receiving a stipend or tuition. Knowing where your cash flow is gives you the confidence to make smart decisions. It puts your hands on the steering wheel and you're able to drive your financial vehicle where you want it to go. Phil, any gaps that you might fill in there?
No, I think you're spot on, Kevin, with that.
Okay, I'm going to do two more questions. One, a person graduated undergrad, and they're worried about finances, but they're wondering if it was going to be harder to get back into school after taking a break for financial reasons. If they might want to take a gap, does that make it more challenging to get back into graduate school after taking a break?
I don't think it necessarily makes it harder. What I would say is that the one challenge in that regard could be the loss of momentum. But that's again, and I apologize for the number of times we're just going to say that's an individual thing. It's the best part about being in the financial business is that I can answer every question with, it depends. Like I have gotten away with that for 15 years, and it's been fantastic that I can just say, it depends, right? But it's true because it all depends on individual circumstances, and it depends on individual preferences, behaviors, all that kind of stuff. And so in this case, if you want to take a gap year, I think that's fine. What I would recommend you do is sort of set up the strategy for how are you going to get back into it and what's going to be the process so that you don't lose that momentum. And also use that time to figure out what your financial plan is going to be to get back into school. Because if you don't do that, then you do run the risk of really losing that momentum and not putting yourself in a position where you're going to jump back into school.
Okay, I think I'll add just two quick things. One is that National Name Exchange folks, we also do allow alumni in. We encourage alumni to join. So you can stay in this program for as long as you want. So if you want to try to find a way to keep that momentum, staying in the National Name Exchange after you graduate is one way that you can keep that momentum. The second thing I would say is keep connections with your university folks, because things like letters of recommendation can actually be bigger momentum killers for a lot of people than even finances. So maintaining some of those relationships so that you can have an easier pathway back to a graduate school application. Okay, I saved, I think, maybe the most challenging question for last. So we did have somebody ask, what if I can't take out loans with interest for religious reasons? Are there any resources or tools that can be helpful in navigating a financial system in which the person cannot take out loans with interest?
I'll start and Phil, you clean up. All right. So one of the best tools that I think Phil mentioned earlier were 529 savings plans. They're available in every state. Each state has its own plan. 30 states offer tax advantages. You can literally Google tax advantage by state for 529. It's a great way to invest your money to hopefully get it to grow. That way you can have tax-free withdrawals for qualified expenses, basically. Any education expense is free. Another thing, again, all of those wonderful fellowships, grants, assistantships, ways that you can pay without taking out a loan out of pocket are another really wonderful way to do so. And then, of course, savings are another reason or way to do it. IRAs, Roth IRAs also allow for tax-free distributions to pay for educational expenses. So there are a number of investment vehicles that you might be able to leverage that don't require, interest or anything that would be against your personal beliefs. But I'm going to transfer it to Phil and he'll fill in, again, any gaps that I missed.
I mean, you covered what I would say. I think the only thing that I would add is you have that employer opportunity as well, where you could potentially have them pay for it if you're able to find an employer that provides that incentive. I think the other thing that's nice, nice might not be the right word, but I think the thing you know your situation. You understand what your limitations are as it relates to how you're going to be able to pay for school. And what that means is you just have to go into with the mindset of graduate school is the thing you want to do, but you might not be able to do it immediately as a result of the financial limitations that you have. But what that also means is that you have the opportunity to reach out to schools. You can apply to the programs that you want to and see what opportunities there are going to be for you to be able to fund or for them to be able to pay. And that puts you in a position where, as long as you recognize you don't have to say yes to going to school unless you have these conditions met as it relates to your financial situation, you are in good shape in that regard. But again, what I would say is just reach out to the places that you're interested in going to school, find the programs that you really want to be a part of, see what opportunities there are there for you, and then hopefully that will lead you to the path of finding somebody who's willing to pay for you to go to school.
Yeah, one other thing I would add too is I don't see it as much in the grad space, but faith communities often do have means of support for folks in their congregations or their church groups for exactly this reason. They recognize that it is a challenge and limitation. So sometimes talking with your religious or church leaders is another way of finding out if there are some opportunities for you within your community. So with that, we are running a little bit short on time, but I really want to thank Phil and Kevin for their wonderful presentations, as well as their really thoughtful answers to your questions. As if you haven't seen it enough, I will just remind folks one more time that we do have an excellent tool available, GradSense, free website. We did also design this website with NNE students in mind. NNE coordinators had input in the design as well as the content of this site. So you are the community that we built this for. So please use it. And also, if there's things that you think could be improved, let me know, and we can try to integrate that content. So thank you one more time to Phil and Kevin. And I'm going to be following up with everybody who registered with the webinar recording as well as the slides from today. And then if there's some questions we didn't get to, I'll see if I can wrangle Phil and Kevin into giving us a couple more answers that I can send around. But thank you again to the presenters. Please complete the post-webinar survey. And if you have questions about the National Name Exchange, don't hesitate to email us. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day and good luck planning for graduate school.